Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to Attitude Magazine's weekly ADHD Experts broadcast. Today we'll be talking to Kristin Seymour about something really important, about what parents need to know about vaping. Vaping, which is the act of inhaling and exhaling the vapor produced by heated nicotine liquid, is extremely widespread these days. E-cigarettes have been around for more than a decade, but vaping rates have skyrocketed in recent years, especially among teens and young adults. It's so new that most parents of teens don't really know the risks and the warning signs. And known risks include lung irritation, carcinogens, and elevated heart rate and blood pressure. But Kristin Seymour is going to tell us much more about that, including why teens with ADHD why teens diagnosed with ADHD are at such an increased risk for vaping, how to talk about vaping with your kids, the signs that you might look for that might signal that your teen is vaping, how teens and students obtain vaping devices, what to do to detect the presence of nicotine at home, and finally finding a clinician if you think your teen is addicted. So I think this is an important topic. We're very pleased to have a real expert here today. Kristin Seymour is a board-certified adult health clinical nurse specialist specializing in ADHD. She consults with parents of children with ADHD, with colleagues, educators, and discusses the ADHD diagnostic process as well as tools for success, working right now at the Barnes Jewish Hospital in St. Louis, Missouri, in addition to coaching patients in her private practice and lecturing nationally about ADHD and addiction. She's the author of The Fog Lifted, A Clinician's Victorious Journey with ADHD, which sounds fascinating. I'd love to hear more about that, Kristin. And she can be reached at ksfoglifted@gmail.com. And for more information about her and her book, go to ADHDfoglifted.com. So, Kristin, thank you so much for your time today. We are really grateful to have you. Let me thank also our webinar sponsor, which is Play Attention, Enhancing Brain Health and Performance. Play Attention is the leading neurocognitive training program designed to strengthen executive function and self-regulation. The comprehensive Play Attention system includes a NASA-inspired technology, cognitive training, behavior shaping, parent coaching, and much more. It's a full-on system. Call 1-800-788-6786 or click on playattention.com for free ebooks on impulse control, mindfulness, executive function, and much more. So thank you, Play Attention. We are always grateful for your support. And to you, Kristin. As always with our broadcast, Kristin will present her slides, and then she'll take as many questions as you have time for. Before she starts her presentation, we'd like to ask you whether your child or children are vaping, as far as you know. So you'll see the poll come up, and please have a look there and give us your thoughts. While you're taking the poll, just let me take you through the webinar console that you have on your screen. You'll be able to enter your questions in the Ask a Question section of the screen, and do that at any time something occurs to you. You may download Kristin's slides right now by clicking the Download Webinar Slides link. It's in the Event Resources section of your screen. There are tabs to learn more about Play Attention or more about Kristin in the tabs just above the slides. If you have any audio issues, download our GoToWebcast troubleshooting guide, and most audio issues are caused by a slow internet connection. So we recommend Chrome and a wired internet connection. Don't forget to close all other programs or tabs that you may have open just to maximize available bandwidth, and try refreshing your page if you have trouble. So we all want to hear this, and I want to make sure that you have audio that's good. Let's see what the poll says. I'm not sure where that poll is, actually. So let's just go ahead. We'll see the poll later and let Kristin start with her slides.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everyone, for joining me this afternoon. As Susan shared, what is vaping? Vaping is pandemic. It's beyond an epidemic. It is unbelievable how it's overtaken the market, particularly among teens. It is so commonplace. It is the act of inhaling and exhaling vapors of heated nicotine fluid that's suspended in propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin. That's how that's stored in the liquid. And it comes from a metal vaping device called a vaporizer, or often called juuling. Vapors are either liquids or solid. They're mods, pods, and e-liquid. They were very smart with the marketing of vaping because the manufacturers made these, quote, e-liquids, juices, mint, fruit, citrus, mango, creme brulee flavors, very appealing to particularly the teenagers. Vaping's been around for 10 years. It was developed in China. However, this innocent intention to help smoking cessation has evolved into this incredible, commonplace health tragedy and health risk that's very appealing to teens. Teens like the slick look of a Juul. A Juul is the most common vaping device. It looks like a flash drive. And even more concerning, most of these devices can be charged in a USB port of a laptop computer. So vaping is they estimate 2.1 million middle and high school students in the United States who vape. The Child and Mind Institute is who came up with that statistic. The University of Michigan last year ran a study that was looking at what types of vaping the students were doing. Was it just the flavoring? Was it nicotine? Was it marijuana or hash oil? Hash oil is another name for dabbing or CBD oil, marijuana oils that the students are accessing, as well as just the marijuana leaves that they heat up and vape. And it's a staggering nearly 38% of seniors who are vaping either nicotine or marijuana, and up to about 18% of eighth graders overall. And then when you look at the breakdown, the nicotine craved students are almost at 23% in seniors, and then into about 10% of eighth graders. So it's pretty rampant. Some of my patients that I've spoken with have seen the vaping occurring at age 5th grade. 11 and 12-year-old students are familiar with the vaping. Why are ADHD teens more susceptible to vaping than teens without ADHD? It's particularly because they have a neurochemical condition that results in impulsivity and inattentiveness. And there are 3 core deficits that contribute to the act of vaping is their inability to sustain attention to work, their inability to focus, their hyperactivity, they make poor decisions, and their reduced impulse control. The CDC is very focused on the underlying cause of these patients and why these things happen. And with that, these patients are all or nothing speed. And it would be not surprising for an ADHD teen to just grab someone's vape and try it and then like it. Furthermore, teens with ADHD struggle socially. They're constantly worried about what they said or what they're going to say. They're pleasers. They want to be liked. They want to fit in and they want to belong with their peers. These factors make them more prone to peer pressure and making poor choices. It is a fact, Dr. Shar from the Beaumont Children's Health Clinic states, when ADHD symptoms are regulated in healthy ways, ADHD teens are far less likely to turn to harmful substances or vaping. The incidence of self-medication, particularly with vaping, in the ADHD teens is unbelievable. And it primarily is because of their need for speed. These teens are already, by genetics, by nature, low in their dopamine. They have low levels of naturally occurring dopamine in their brains. So in the left side of this left subject of the slide is a non-ADHD teen brain, and you can see the red levels, the higher red level, which is the level of dopamine circulating in that patient's brain. Then to the right of the screen, you see the ADHD subject who has a lack of dopamine. So the ADHD teen is already at risk for nicotine addiction as they're low on naturally occurring dopamine and norepinephrine. We know that nicotine is a central nervous system stimulant. So it's going to release, when it's inhaled, it's going to release dopamine. Dopamine makes the teen feel good. They're going to like it. So that is what happens, and it's extremely addicting. It's nicotine is highly addicting, particularly in the Juuls and the Stigs. There's a high percent of nicotine, which we'll talk about in a minute. E-cigarette use in the last 5-10 years has increased 900% between 2011 to 2015. These are different. This is a Soren Air vape. That's another example. And what happens, and this is another e-cigarette. And I have examples of these, which I'll show you at the end. But you see here, there's a battery at the bottom right of that electronic cigarette. And any time and anywhere in life, when you're dealing with batteries, anything can go wrong. You're always at risk for an explosion or for leakage or for, the heat that comes with these. And it's very, they can be very dangerous. This I found kind of interesting, and it's so true that most people and most teens are ready, aim, fire, but people with ADHD are ready, fire, and then they think about aiming. And this is such a problem with these kids with the vaping, because they just want to do whatever their peers are doing, and they just do it, and then they think about the repercussions later. And by that time, often they are already addicted, because this is such a highly addictive agent, particularly with Juul, which is a type of vaping device and owns about 50 to 75% of the market. Here we go. So this is Juul right here. Juul hit the market in 2015. It was developed by, I believe it was graduate students at Stanford in 2014, to make a swift anti-smoking device. And with its sleek look, and it looks like, as I showed you before, a USB port, a flash drive that would plug easily into, this is the charger, into the USB port of the computer. It's very inconspicuous and very easy for a teacher or a parent to not even wonder what that is. So Juul, a starter pack would be about $35 to $45, and a dealer price is $65 to $75. In most counties in the United States, most counties will say that it's illegal under the age of 21, but in most cities, it's illegal under the age of 18. So when you look at this incidence of these high school and middle schoolers participating in vaping and juuling under the age of 18, it's illegal for them to have possession and or be inhaling this product. So each of these right here are called pods, and each pod, there's 4. There's a brown one for menthol tobacco flavor. A mango is the pinkish red. Then you have the green, which is mint, and then I believe you have citrus to the bottom right, or used to be creme brulee. And on the right, you have your bow cap, which is a different type of vaping device. They're a little more expensive because they only have 3.5% nicotine in each of these little caps. They're not called pods. So there's 5% nicotine in each one of these Juul pods, and that's a lot of nicotine. One Juul pod is equivalent to a pack of cigarettes. So 5% nicotine in each one of these Juul pods is equivalent to smoking an entire pack of cigarettes. So that's pretty alarming, because the savvy marketers for this product, for Juul particularly, on the label says 5% nicotine. So the student or the consumer is left to think, oh, well, then it's 95% water vapors and innocent, not a big deal. When in fact, it's 5% nicotine and about 700 other chemicals and toxins that can be really potentially deadly, but harmful to your child's health. So I took this straight from the Juul website, because Juul is owning the market at 50 to 75% of the vaping market since 15. It was the FYI, a little fact is, it was the fastest company to be valued, a valuation of $10 billion in the history of any company. And it's faster than Facebook. So the growth of Juul is incredible. And right from their website, I took our ingredients include vegetable glycerin, propylene glycol, oils, extracts, flavor, nicotine, and benzoic acid. It is a fact, because sometimes when I give this talk to middle school and high school students, they'll say, well, the FDA approved glycerin and propylene glycol. Well, that's true. It is approved by the FDA for food and stomach absorption, but it is not FDA approved for inhalation into the lungs. Glycerin, in fact, can potentially, and so can propylene glycol, break down surfactant in the lungs because they're considered toxins. And there was a study done in January of 2018 by the Academies of Science, Technology, and Medicine that studied over 800 different works and studies. And the bottom line is it is dangerous and unsafe to be inhaling glycerin and propylene glycol into our lungs. So with Juul, the one that I keep showing you is the most common vaping device, there's something called Juul compatible pods. And Juul pods you can have Zalt, or there's VGOD, there's Zalt is one brand, and they're the same kind of pod like this that can be loaded into the Juul device, so the student just has to buy more of the cartridges. So these are also readily available on Amazon, or any manufacturer, Walmart. These kids can buy these anywhere, but they need to be 18 or 21, and they're able to just put in a false birth date and access these very quickly. A new kind of vaping device is the Enjoy Vape, and it looks like a dab pen. It basically, I don't know if many of you are familiar with what wax and dab is, but it's a very high percentage of THC. It's a very, it's a waxy substance, and it's like marijuana, but it's way more THC, way more potent, and it's called dab, and that looks like a dab pen right there, but it's actually a vaping device where they can vape more of those flavors, and that's a starter kit. And the button right there is what they press to activate the heat. The heat, by the way, gets up to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And when they activate the heat, the liquid turns into a vapor, and they can then inhale that and have the exchange and get their nicotine high. So Stigs are another type of vaping device. Stigs are also very new. They've been out in the last few years, very rampant. There's one here, VGOD, another just regular old Stig, tropical mangoes, that flavor. These are sometimes citrus or mango. And these are pre-filled loaded cartridges that have a low wattage battery and don't need to be charged. So they're disposable single-use vaping devices. And these are pictures of parents sending me, what is this, Kristin? What is this? One mom found this little bunch of pods, Juul pods that are empty, and caps on those, and then the Stigs in the front yard, and sent me a picture. This is another parent who found a bunch of empty Juul pods and starter kits. The child was probably likely selling to friends. And then this is another example of a VGOD, tropical mango disposable. Stigs are about 6% nicotine, so they're 1% more than a Juul, so they're higher nicotine and they're disposable. And they're also very inconspicuous. Those look like a jump drive or a flash drive as well. So, I have a question. I don't know if you want me to answer this now. How does vaping use relate to the use of marijuana? Well, vaping use, I guess they're both.
Kristin, I think probably we should hold the questions. Yeah, let's, because we've got lots. So we'll get back to that. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay. So thank you, Susan. So there's 700 chemicals, toxins, and carcinogens in every mod, pod, e-liquid, cap, or juice. All of those terms are similar. They're kind of synonymous. So this is an example of e-liquid, or juice, if you will. And it's flavored like strawberries, and that's what they can put in this kind of vaping device. This is a large vaporizer here, and you put the liquid in and heat it up with the batteries and then inhale it. And what I want to call your attention to is this e-liquid and this Juul pod, both in sub-zero conditions, do not freeze. So in 2009, the FDA pulled 10 pre-filled vaping cartridges, not necessarily Juul or Vape,
because Juul wasn't even out yet. We're talking 2009. They pulled random pre-filled vaping cartridges, and they found diethylene glycol, and that's a toxin that is found in antifreeze. Antifreeze is a coolant, as you know, that keeps your fluids in your car from freezing, and it keeps them liquid, if you will. So there were traces of diethylene glycol found in pre-filled vaping fluids and cartridges. Kind of scary. Anything that you're going to put in your body that's not going to freeze in sub-zero temperatures is kind of concerning. Nicotine addiction under the age of 18 is very, very, very frightening. 9 out of 10 addicts, any kind of addict, opioid addict, alcoholic, drug addict, any addict, 9 out of 10 started using nicotine before age 18. So it's just further evidence that these students, they're at risk. Their brains are still developing, and they're impulsive, especially the ADHDers. And the nicotine can be very, very detrimental to their brain growth and development. So with ADHD and nicotine, when teens try to cease vaping, the same or worse symptoms that they have with their general ADHD and that they try to manage and fight are exacerbated. Exacerbated means they're worsened. So the symptoms they're trying to already manage as they come off of nicotine, because in the short term, it might help their ADHD symptoms because the stimulant helps the dopamine, helps them focus for a little bit. But over time, and some studies are showing 3 months to 6 months, it actually ends up making them so addicted that they're jonesing and craving for that nicotine. And it also, because you're bringing in outside forms, it worsens their natural production of dopamine healthily. So the patients become more anxious, more nervous, and they have more appetite suppression and insomnia. I have tried to help several of my patients wean off. 2 are very successful. A couple are still struggling, but it is the nicotine addiction is unlike any I have seen in these teens in a long time. So regarding the safety of the vapes devices, there's a website called eSig1 online, and they are committed to demonstrating the danger of vapes and vaping. And so there have been 316 vape explosions since May of 2018 was when they started measuring these, monitoring these, and calculating and keeping track. 82 happened during inhalation and use. 92 explosions happened during charging, when these batteries for the bigger vaporizer or when these exploded when they were charging the Juul on its charger. Because again, it gets very hot. 75 happened during storage, and 67 involved spare batteries for when the removable battery mods for the bigger vaporizer. One story that's very interesting is one of my patients shared that his buddy was his pocket was smoking as they were walking down the hall, and he said, what's going on? And the kid's like, oh my gosh, it's my Juul. And he had left this the Juul pod in with his heated up Juul, and it started smoking in his pants, and it could have caught on fire, but they resolved it. 219 vape explosions resulted in personal injury or death. I had some photos of the faces of teenagers that had some titanium burn explosions. They're pretty disturbing, so we decided not to put them in this presentation. But if you're interested, you can email me and I can share with you the mouth sores and the explosions in kids' faces. Side effects of vaping are, let's see, I don't know if mine are popping up here. Well, you have mouth sores, addiction. Let's see. I'm not seeing my examples. Oh, here we go. Sorry. Mouth sores, addiction. And the mouth sores look like herpes. They're very red, raw. Do you have addiction? The mouth sores, by the way, we're going to go back to that real quick. They're painful. It's hard for the student to swallow. They also have a really harsh, horsey voice. It's very hoarse. And they also are very obviously, I've said 100 times, the addiction is just profound. And they also have irreversible lung disease, which is bronchiolitis obliterans, which I will expand on in the next slide. And then we just discussed explosion and chronic bronchitis. Those are just some of the side effects, in addition to skin irritation and there's like a skin rash they almost get in their body, not just by their mouth. So with regard to the vaping irreversible lung disease, some people call it popcorn lung. There's a very small study that shows that a tiny bit of diacetyl, which is a chemical that's found in the flavoring of butter popcorn, was inhaled, and people in this popcorn factory had popcorn lung, nicknamed irreversible lung disease. I think that's kind of a weak study, in my opinion, and from what I've read in my professional opinion as a heart and vascular clinician. This vaping and the glycerin and the propylene glycol definitely are toxins that cause irreversible, permanent, bilateral lung damage. When you have lung cancer from combustible traditional cigarettes, you're able to remove a portion of the lobe of the cigarette, or of the lung, and get treatment. With vaping, you have permanent, irreversible lung damage. Kind of interesting. So with the parents and what they can identify with how they're accessing and paying for these vaping devices, Bitcoin is one way that a lot of students were finding financing, getting their drugs of all kinds, marijuana plus the vaping devices. And this was a digital currency that was found in 2009. The thing about Bitcoin is you don't have banks or people's names. It's very anonymous. And so students were doing that. But Amazon is one place where students can just type in their birthday. That's how I received my packages of my jewels. I just went in and typed in my birthday, and then they just shipped it to me. So a student could just make up a birthday and have these products sent to them. Snapchat is another place where the dealers, you can just go to a page where you live, and these students can find people to bring them vaping devices, marijuana, and other drugs and alcohol. So it's very, very accessible, and that's how they're paying for it as well. One little caveat that I think is important to make note of is recently a couple of the patients I work with, parents, made note that their student, their child, was increasing their Uber Eats and their Postmates. And the parents were like, they're ordering like $50, $60 worth of food at school for lunch. And it dawned on me, I thought, you know what? They're probably buying lunch for other kids in trade for more Juul pods or something, possibly. I'm not accusing them, but it's pretty likely that they would buy for upperclassmen or other students lunch, and then in exchange for Juul pods. Traditional cigarette smoking, I just put this slide in here because one of my patients thought this was really fascinating, because when you ask students, do you think that smoking's dangerous? 100% of them will raise their hand and say yes. I would never smoke a cigarette. Well, when you think about it, in 1865, the first commercial cigarettes were made and distributed. It took almost 90 years for the first link to carcinogens, which means cancer-causing agents, and lung cancer was discovered. It took 99 years. It took till 1964 for the Surgeon General, the government, the highest level physician, to issue that smoking was dangerous and put packages with labels stating such. So it took 99 years to discover the dangers of cigarette smoking. Vaping was only invented 10 years ago. Why be the guinea pig? We don't know what we're dealing with. Common hiding places for students who are vaping and doing any other drugs are tampon boxes, calculators in the battery section of the back of the battery compartment, as well as with alarm clocks where the batteries go. Those are places parents find them, as well as the vent. The vent of a house like this, the floor vent there in the bottom left corner, that's a very common spot, as well as the bottom of these snack containers, the Oreo container this man is holding. Teddy bears. I've had 3 parents find vaping devices in teddy bears on people's shelves, particularly males. And then the wedges, they're using X-Acto knives, and they're opening up a side and then hiding the pod there, if you will. And then they also have books, and they'll cut out the middle of a book and they'll just pop it in there. Parents would never look. Signs and symptoms to look for a teen that is possibly on vaping or on any kind of drugs. The signs to look for are a change in the friend group, a change in appetite, sudden cravings, sudden urges, different cravings, change in the group, not hanging with former friends, complaints about teachers with missing assignments or misbehavior in class, acting out, poor grades, and lying. Those are really the most common signs of drug abuse in teens. And this to the right, this is a picture of what one of my parents that I work with found in her son's car before we really got heavy working with him. And you can see there the jewel and the charger, a lighter, and then some other paraphernalia. And one other thing is, if you suspect your child is vaping, check. There's a rapid urine test. There's several on the market to detect for nicotine. When nicotine is inhaled, obviously it stimulates dopamine release. It makes people feel good sometimes in the beginning. But it also releases something called continine. So nicotine is converted to a chemical called continine in the body. So if a parent is suspicious of their child juuling or vaping, they can have the child urinate, void in a cup, and then use one of these different tests to put a sample into the test. It's like a dipstick test. And the test does meet the accepted cutoff for 200 nanograms per milliliter of the presence of nicotine, if you will, 2 to 4 days after use. But it can be present for up to 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how much the student uses and how prevalently and how long they've been using it. You can buy it online in packs of 10 of these tests for $16. So the interesting thing I want to call your attention to is the test on the right of the screen is positive, and it only has one line. The test line doesn't have a line there, and I think it's important to note the test on the left has a positive line. The reason why is when you have when the drug is present, so when continine is present, it interferes with the dye used to detect that line, and it doesn't show up. That's why the positive one only has one line. But that all says it in the kit. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And we're almost finished for questions. I just wanted to make sure we go through this part here. Sometimes saying no is not enough, and scripting is very important. These are statements taken from some of the kids I work with, because a parent can say, just say no, or, I can tell you to just say no, but sometimes that's not enough. And, these are some sample lines that have worked for kids that I work with, that are realistic. And I think that just scripting these kids, especially the ADHD kids that don't think that we're kind of now and not now. We can't stop and think about it and count to 5 or 10, but not sure if you're aware, but I got in enough trouble last time to last a lifetime. Or why would I want to put something that you plug into the wall or my computer into this body for an athlete? Or keep a bottle of lemonade or a Yeti cup that's, or some kind of a cup full at parties, and just say I'm covered. Students are less likely to offer substances when they know that you already have a drink in hand. So these are just some examples. And you can always blame your parents. They like to be the scapegoat of the fall guy, and find something to do and look busy. When people look busy and they DJ and they dance, people aren't going to usually bother them too much. And the other thing is to help your child. I'm talking 5th grade all the way through college. Help them understand the severity of drinking, drugs, and vaping, but to create a word or a phrase that only you and your child know that means pick me up or help. That's particularly for your middle school, as young as 5th grade through 8th grade. Kids should share their locations with their parents, send them where they are. Perhaps install a transportation service with a prepaid credit card, as the student might not enter, as the student, by the way, needs to enter the vehicle knowing who's picking them up. They should never ride alone. I tell all my families, make sure that they have another friend to go with them, typically boys with boys and girls with girls, and to go straight home and not to another party. Have a plan for them to leave and go home and feel safe. Don't ask any questions. Talk about nicotine addiction and vaping, because research shows that the incidence and the use will go down 44% if they talk about it openly with their parents. So that's it. I kind of went a little quick, but I knew we only had 30 minutes to cover a lot of information.
Yeah, really sobering, Kristin. Very sobering.
And that was without. Yeah, I'm presenting this at the International Conference on ADHD in November. And so if you want more details, that's where that will be. Okay.
Folks, please post your questions. I see we have a number of them, but this is the time. Let's see. Kristin, can you just recap the relationship of vaping to marijuana use? Versus nicotine, just to clarify.
Well, it depends on if they're asking about vaping marijuana and vaping nicotine, or if they're talking about the relationship of dopamine with nicotine and dopamine with dope, which is marijuana.
The question is vaping only for nicotine, or does it also use for marijuana?
It's also used for marijuana. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And marijuana, some of these, they're using they're grinding it. They're grinding the marijuana leaves down. They're grinding the cannabis, and they're like liquefying it and putting it back into these little pods. And then they're also making wax and dab, which is, 80% THC. And that's, way more impactful.
Okay. A big question among the listeners is that their kids simply don't understand that there's a problem with vaping. And so they're asking, how do I get my child to want to stop vaping when they don't seem to be aware that there are difficulties with it?
The student I saw 2 weeks ago did not think that vaping was, I see a lot of kids, but this mom came only for this reason, not for ADHD coaching and therapies and techniques. She came for me to work with her child. And when that child left, she'll never touch a vaping device. The kids who see the slide of the vaping sores and the blown up vape in the child's face and the 14-year-old on life support are pretty compelling, and they're backed. And every slide, as you know, I have is cited with multiple references. And I think that when a child sees the you're one decision away from a totally different life every time, and you do something like this. And when I showed this little girl with mom's permission, because as you know, Susan, they were very disturbing slides. I know Wayne and you and I talked about it. They are not for just commonplace webinar like this informational one. Mom and dad were on board. They saw the slides themselves. They were pretty upset. And then the daughter came in, she was 15, and she was shocked. She was scared straight. So I think it's important to show the kids the actual facts. The picture says 1,000 words. And I also think coming from a clinician like me or another clinical expert, they're far more likely to listen and have it resonate than mom and dad saying it's not okay, and explain why. Just saying it's not good for you shuts the conversation down.
Right. Okay. Just another clarifying question. Do all vaping devices include nicotine? Just trying to understand.
That's a good question.
Between the
90% of them do. I do have a patient I work with in New York who she really just likes to vape and taste the eucalyptus oil of hers. It's flavoring only. There's no nicotine in it. There's no nicotine, no marijuana, no hash in hers. It's just literally flavoring. And so many of the 5th and 6th graders, in my experience, are the ones that like the flavoring and the taste. It's more of an oral fixation. ADHDers are very tactile people. They're into their feelings, sense, textures and oral fixations, and that's what that is. So I would say about, in my experience, 10 to 15% of my patients vape, and it is very, very innocent when it's just the fluid, like a flavor. But again, I think you're still putting chemicals in your body, and it's not a good idea. Okay. So 90%, in my opinion, or 85 are nicotine fueled or marijuana fueled.
Right. What number of listeners have children who are vaping and they're concerned about, given the withdrawal symptoms, what kind of support or what kind of counseling or what kind of professionals work with kids to help them manage nicotine addiction and vaping addiction and to get through the withdrawal process?
Are you asking me or the listeners?
No, I'm asking you, yes.
My patients, I work directly with kids because I don't know who else would. The pediatricians don't know. You wouldn't send these kids necessarily to rehab for this, but, I ask my other patients who have quit or tried to quit what's worked, and then I share that with the student and the parent. But remember, it grew 78% between the incidence among high school and middle schoolers between 17 and 18. So you're talking, they went from 350 to 500,000, depending on what source you look at, to 2.1 million teens vaping fast. So they're way ahead of the market. The FDA is flat-footed. The manufacturers are way ahead of the market. And so we can't even keep up with what to do with these students. And that's why I believe this topic has been such a hot topic I know you guys have done a lot of coverage for it because people don't know what to do or who to help them quit.
Right.
I know people don't approve of this sometimes, but I believe that sometimes scaring them straight works. I know some parents don't believe in that, and that's fine. But my results are pretty good when you scare them with the facts. I think facts are compelling.
Well, I think you've made a compelling case for that because a significant number of listeners would like to know where they can see those pictures so they can show them to their children.
Well, I was wondering if you, Susan, you and I can talk a lot, if you would like me to upload those to you all, or if people who don't wish to see them could just get off of this now and I could pull them up. People could email me, but I imagine that might be several hundred, maybe a few thousand. I don't know, because there's so many registered. I just would love, when I showed these to my own children and to the kids I work with, they were like this, like, oh my God, they could not even. And then I said, that could be you. All the years of braces and dermatology, and your parents love you so much. I mean, why would you, in your own life, why would you do that? You care about your looks enough to get braces and spray tans. Why don't you care enough about this?
Well, let's discuss this, and we'll find a way to get the slides, the photographs to the people who are interested, because it sounds like it's a pretty compelling case.
When you show the slide to the parent and to the student can go to a party and someone says, hey, you want to hit this? And she says no. And they go, come on, we're our little sissy. You want to hit this? She can just put up her phone and show a picture and say, no, thanks.
Right.
And, I think it just says a lot of things, but you're right. We are kind of in a double standard. We don't want to freak people out, but people who would like to see it, I think it's very compelling.
Okay. Is that one of the things that's worked best in your experience to help kids quit vaping?
For me, yes.
For me, it has. Tactic. Yeah.
It does. And, Dr. Hallowell and I did a podcast on this, not this exact same topic, but very similar. And we had a couple parents that weren't thrilled about that scare tactic, but if it works, why wouldn't you? I mean, I think that we need our kids to be like, if you're tough enough and cool enough and smart enough to get the device and go and lie about your birthday and buy off of it and steal from your parents, then you should be tough enough to see this.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of my opinion as a clinical expert and a professional and as a mom.
Should people who are concerned about their children and want to help them look for an addiction counselor? What is the profession?
I believe that would probably be the best. That would probably be the best thing to start with. Yes, to answer your question. Yes, I think that an addiction counselor would be excellent. I've had a couple therapists in St. Louis. I am not a therapist. I'm a nurse practitioner. I'm a clinical nurse specialist, similar to an NP, and I am achieving my postmaster's degree in mental health. I am not a counselor. But counselors in St. Louis have referred to me for like that girl we spoke of earlier, the 15-year-old. I had a counselor refer to me knowing my subspecialty, because what you want is someone who's clinical enough and knows this area enough.
Okay.
So I would say addiction counselor or someone who is an expert in vaping.
Yeah. Okay. It's a question about using vapes in order to try to quit smoking cigarettes. Does vaping help or prolong the smoking addiction?
That's a good question. That's a very good question, and I could probably find exact data on that. And from what I've read and what I understand, I believe it's really helped people because the tar that's in cigarette smoke, the tar is like that's what you don't get with the e-cigarette is the tar, and so that is improved, and the risk of obviously cancer, but then again you have bronchiolitis obliterans, so you still have some kind of a chronic lung condition. But yes, it does help. It does help, from what I can understand.
There, one or two listeners have mentioned that their children have ADHD and depression, and they are wondering. I guess their children are saying that vaping helps them with their depression and anxiety, and they're wondering how to treat, which comes first in terms of treatment: depression, anxiety, vaping. How does one address that?
As Dr. Hallowell said, that's the $1 million question.
Right.
The ADHD versus anxiety cycle with the depression. 40% of ADHD patients, according to the CDC, have a comorbid condition. And oftentimes it is an anxiety, and it could be a depression. But you would have to go and see your pediatrician, get an official diagnosis, possibly a psychiatrist, or a counselor, and get a differential diagnosis to know exactly what you're dealing with first. Then you need to, because if it's an anxiety condition, this is my experience again and my interpretation, in anxiety disorders and conditions, when you give a student a stimulant, it worsens and exacerbates their anxiety. So if they're finding relief in that, then that tells me, gosh, maybe we're dealing with a depression more and our ADHD symptoms aren't being managed properly. And again, I'm not a huge fan of pushing pills at people with ADHD. About a third of my practice is, a third to a half is not medicated on stimulants. But I do believe that if you manage those symptoms properly for ADHD, the conditions, the comorbid conditions are better, because if sometimes when you don't manage ADHD or acknowledge it long enough, you get depressed.
Yeah, and that's a question also that's coming up here. What's the relationship between ADHD medication and vaping? So does ADHD medication interfere with getting over the withdrawal? Does tweaking the ADHD medication become relevant in terms of
I would
vaping?
I would defer that to, in my experience, I found that when they're on the right ADHD medication, if they are medicated, that when they're on the right one, the drive and the desire to vape is gone. I had one young man, and he's a freshman in high school, and he said, he goes, I don't have that urge as much as I did when I was on X-Med, this one medication. And now that I feel so much more in control, focused and engaged and present, I don't want to sit there and stew when I can go to the bathroom and hit the Juul. So I think that every case is different. But I do believe that if you healthily manage ADHD symptoms, whether it's exercise, friends, sleep, diet, meds, whatever, they're not going to be driven and have that urge. So yes, the lack of dopamine, the stimulant, is going to help.
Yeah, there's extensive literature on addiction and lifestyle problems that come from untreated ADHD, however, whatever that treatment, as you say, may be. So that makes sense. This is a comment from someone. She says, I keep hoping that my inattentive and unorganized child will just accidentally leave his vaping materials in an obvious place. Am I being naive? I think she knows the answer.
Yes, but that's okay. We all are sometimes. But I think to look in those hiding places we discussed, I think looking at those hiding places and searching their book bags and, in their bedroom and their closets, their closet shelf, their tampon boxes for girls, things like that. I think it's under the mattress for boys too. I think you can find it and then you can just put it on their desk. They know you found it. And then I also think that if they really want to quit, I would strongly encourage getting those nicotine tests, because they are accurate and they do detect nicotine.
You had some good suggestions for for helping children with scripts to avoid being in a situation where they feel compelled to take part in vaping or something else. Do you have any suggestions for parents in terms of the kinds of conversations or questions or comments or ways to approach the conversation about
that's a good question. I would simply say to them, when I have to my own kids, I would just ask them if they're already vaping or abusing anything, for that matter, marijuana, alcohol, anything. I would say, do you feel like your mind is just out like a marching band in your head, or constant music in your mind that can't calm down, that won't relax? Do you feel like you cannot settle yourself down? And do you feel like, because once you find your why, you can do anyhow. And so I think that sometimes if we know what we're dealing with and your child feels like they can talk to you about it and say, when I vape, I feel better because that nicotine makes me focus and it doesn't make me high. Because a non-ADHDer who hits that jewel over and over, or smokes weed, is going to feel a high. The ADHDer is going to feel like I'm focused. I mean, if you want to be fully transparent, I smoked a pack and a half of Marlboro cigarettes myself when I was 16, 17, 18, 19. Okay? Before I had my diagnosis of ADHD, and drank Diet Mountain Dew to go to bed. So I would self-medicate with stimulants, central nervous system stimulants, to manage the ADHD symptoms. And that's what these kids are doing today. And I'm not saying everyone who's vaping is got ADHD or anxiety. I'm not saying that, but a lot of cases, these kids have an underlying neurochemical condition of some kind, and that they're trying to cope because they're embarrassed with the negative stigma of a mental illness.
Right. Especially in high school. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can we talk a little bit about the school environment? There are some counselors listening in who are asking whether there are any good materials that they can use in school to educate students about the realistic risks of vaping. Can you recommend any?
One of the best articles I've read in my research for this talk and for the talk at the international conference last year and next year, one of the best articles was by Attitude. And it was, I will tell you which version it was, but it was an excellent article written in the past 6 months by one of your contributing authors. And it was written by Catherine Martinelli, and that article was excellent. It was factual. It's a great tool. And in my professional opinion as a nurse and as a parent and an expert in the area, I thought that was one of the best tool. So,
so what we're going to do
also
is
this presentation.
Yes. So what we'll do is we'll have a page on our website, listeners, where you can download these slides, replay the webinar, hear it again. We'll also have a link to the article that Kristin just mentioned. And we'll also have a link.
It was
to
excellent.
Great. Thank you. And we'll also have a link to the page if we can make this work, which I think we should be able to with the photos that everybody would like to be able to show their children.
Yes.
So another question regarding school is that one listener's child was caught juuling at school as a sophomore, but the administration said that they had been aware that he was vaping, but they couldn't speak to the parents because of privacy concerns. And she's wondering, aren't there laws that require school administrators to inform parents if they feel a student or suspect a student is using a product or a drug? What is the relationship of the school?
Well, if the student I don't know. I wouldn't speak to that because I don't know the state that they're talking about. Like I know Missouri laws, and I have an attorney that I ask a lot of questions to who has education law experience and an expert in that area. But so I won't speculate. But in my experience, again, and I work with people all across the world. If a patient or a student is under 18 and they're doing anything in that school environment, my expectation would be for a parent to know. I've never, in my experience for 2 years of working with these students, ever heard of a school not informing a parent, especially under 18 years old. Right. They're a minor, and that's illegal it's illegal under 18 to have possession of this and or be smoking this. So in my opinion, I would probably solicit some counsel for that.
Okay. All right. Deborah says that her son's been vaping for about 2 years. They only recently learned of it, and he's addicted to nicotine. His doctor is suggesting medical marijuana based on his multiple diagnoses of ADHD, anxiety, and depression.
Well, then that would be great for it.
Is this a common practice for teenagers? I don't think so.
It's not. You're not in your experience, Susan, and not in mine.
No.
I do believe CBD oil, if it's warranted under the, being monitored under a physician, and it's, helpful for that student to feel calm and comfortable in their own skin, absolutely. But that has to be with a physician's order. And I don't recommend anything other than good old fashioned wean off the nicotine, get some great habits, go outside and play, stimulate your dopamine in other ways. But if a student's depressed, I would consider an agent that is effective with stimulating dopamine and in depression, which there are several on the market for a depression and comorbid ADHD. I would do that before medical marijuana, in my professional opinion. Right.
And there are some listeners who say that their clients or their children are starting CBD oil for anxiety due to their ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's
just be careful on who the vendor is, and be careful. Be aware and astute of the manufacturer, where it's coming from, how much THC is in it, and that kind of stuff. What percent of it's cannabis?
Right. Here's a listener making the argument that one could argue that for ADHD teens, smoking cigarettes would be worse. So is vaping the lesser of two evils? I think that from your presentation, we don't know that yet. Would that be right?
We don't know that yet. There's not, that's a good question, because every one of the articles said that every ounce of research says there needs to be more research on this. It's taken over the market. Vaping is so new. We don't know yet. I mean, it could be worse than smoking cigarettes. We just don't know. At this point, I'm split 50-50. Mm-hmm. They're both bad. Anything you're putting in your body that's not natural and healthy is kind of something, I'd be concerned about. They're both bad, because the lungs are very fragile, thin, delicate membrane, organs, and they're vital organs. You have 3 vital organs: your brain, your heart, and your lungs, right? You have 3 vital organs. Why put something in your body that's going to mess with one of those?
Yeah, it seems from the comments that we're reading that many kids just simply do not believe the statements that this is risky.
Well, I think maybe next time we would do one with all those nasty pictures and my credentials behind them.
We'll try to get those on a page on our website with a link, so that you can sit down before you click on the link.
I just think it's helpful. I think it's helpful. I think also when parents know what they're talking about, it's much more compelling than when it's a parent going, "It's bad. I read an article in the magazine." Forget it. I mean, I have a backpack here full of vaping devices and everything, so I can show the kids, look, I've tried this. I know it's awful. It doesn't taste good. I don't understand. I can relate with them in a way it's different, and I'm not their parent, so they usually listen.
Right. Well, Kristin, this has been just amazing. And we will get that page up, everybody. You'll go to attitudemag.com/webinars and we'll get up a page where you can
see the vaping
the vaping photos. You can have your child watch this webinar. It'll be available for replay, and you can download the slides. So I think you've done a fabulous job, Kristin. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Listeners, I want to thank again Play Attention, the sponsor of our webinar. They have a great system for managing ADHD, playattention.com. And I want to tell you about 2 upcoming webinars next week, Tuesday, June 25th, for adult women, getting beyond the shame and the guilt and moving on with your life if you have a woman with ADHD. And then on July 8th, this will be an interesting one, a parent's guide to mindfulness and self-regulation strategies for children with ADHD. So then we'll be going into our Success at School series, which has got some great speakers lined up. So thank you all for attending Attitudes webinars. We hope you find them useful. And don't forget to check the replays on our website, attitudemag.com/webinars, as well as the podcast versions, both on our website and on iTunes. Thanks again, Kristin, and everyone for listening in.
Thank you, Susan.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.